We can't hear you.
Coast of Ireland and let the wind and the waves and the light do their magic. I think it's great to blow a hole in your heart. So I sort of taken the idea and you suggest visiting a glacier and thinking about it as the present. Take the time to walk back to the Pleistocene. Just off the highway between Jasper and Banff, park the car to board a snow bus that deposits you on the ice field. Or you can guzzle glacial meltwater from the Moulin, water with the purity that preceded your species. Pay attention, or you could tumble into a crevasse from which you would not emerge until the ice is melted. Kneel down, touch the glacial tongue with reverence, but know that you violate it. Consider that it recedes and loses depth beneath your body, that it may disappear within the life of your child. Let the ice pierce a hole in you, even as it melts. Well, this one is called Blue. It's about the color of blue, but also the very mood associated with blue. It's sort of a prose poem in 3 parts. Blue's on a brush jar that holds my pen. Cobalt, lapis, azure, and pale blue make a blue jagged mountain, blue tree rooted in a blue mound by a small house outlined in blue, with a distant blue sail on water and a few birds blue in flight. There is a blue for each phase of a mood that travels from dark to light and back again. The Dutch named Delft blue for a city where potters tinplate a cheaper version of Chinese porcelain. Vermeer painted blue scarves and dresses on Delft women and girls. My friend Helen, who chose to be Dutch, could have stepped out of a Vermeer portrait in her blue skirt and matching scarf, and a mood more sun yellow than any shade of blue. He might have painted her as she talked to yellowbirds and tabby cats at the same time. In her presence, they were friends. Years before Delft, I visited Beijing and walked Liulichang, street named for kilns that glazed with fired glazed tile for Ming temples and palaces. I was eager to buy calligraphy on scrolls, stone rubbings on rice paper, teacups, brush jars. I was a foreigner in my own body and in this ancient country where I knew no words and understood nothing. Tonight is Beethoven night, and so I have a couple of Beethoven poems that seem appropriate. The first is called Conversation with Beethoven. I like to use my poems to have conversations with people, particularly composers who lived in previous centuries. So it's usually pretty much a one-word conversation. This one actually came out of a dream talking to Beethoven. Conversation with Beethoven. He glowered, as he often did before. I wonder if this will be possible. He was deaf. I don't speak German. Does language still matter, I asked? He shakes his head. This was to be your year, 250th birthday celebration. He half smiled. Every orchestra programmed you, all the symphonies and concertos, Missa Solemnis, Fidelio, quartets, but a novel virus seized the living world. Everything had to be canceled. He shrugs, as though he knows, or perhaps doesn't care much. Do you pay attention to performances anymore? He shakes his head. I'm guessing you like the size of orchestras now. It's what you always wanted, isn't it? Again, he almost smiled. I am suddenly aware of music, unlike any I have heard before. What is that? Where's it coming from? It's not like anything you ever wrote. Finally, he smiles, motions me closer, speaks in a language I do not know, but understand. I am no longer bound by a system of tones that can be sketched on paper. I am truly free. Now, this one is called To Michelangelo's Dying Slave, which was inspired by seeing the statue in the Louvre. No pain mars your marble face, your pose almost erotic, left arm flung back behind your head, right hand fingering the spear slit in your chest, one knee bent, your David-like face tilted slightly away from us, eyes shut. Your vision inward, released on your face as you die at your feet. Your body still radiates desire like a new star, even as you enter that space beyond desire. As if you hear a melody, like the Liebestod, composed 300 years after your dying was carved. That one-time song when love and death meld before the end. If you could speak, you would tell us nothing. And here's the other Beethoven poem. If you ever took piano lessons, you probably played Fur-Elise, as I did. Still do. I tried to do some research on who Elise might have been, and there really is no information. And the theory is that his handwriting was so bad that the publisher got the name wrong. So there really was no Elise. But I decided since there's no information, I'm free to invent her. So this poem is for Beethoven from Elise, her message to him. You ruined me for other men, you know. I have been loved by others more handsome than you, with gentle touch and pretty words. But each time I begin to fall, your teasing eighth note that presses the melody forced through me to intervene. It was a trifle for you, your A minor bagatelle with its little arcs and bridges, always coming back to that winsome lyric, forever implanted in my body and brain. A theme that never fully resolved, like my feelings for you. Your publisher got my name wrong through your terrible handwriting. Elise does not exist, so she will outlive me, the taunt generations of piano students who will love or hate her for testing them, making fun of their imperfect playing, much as you do for me. I could never possess you or you me, yet because of that little piece dashed off an hour ago, we will stay forever linked, what we both wanted, I believe. Another of my favorite composers is Mendelssohn, and I particularly like his songs without words. There's no subject, no program, so the listener, performer is free to bring through with their own feelings about what the subject is, the program, the words. And for me, it's often spring, light, my parents, Scotland, my mother, Scottish descent. Mendelssohn travels there a lot. It was meditation, spring, Mendelssohn, songs without words. It was never just about lengthening light, the sun shifting hemispheres, buds that presses blossoms, or my being born. There was always a darker side. And then death happened, father at equinox, mother a few days before. Spring became about endings too. Whatever the season or infection circling the world, I returned to Mendelssohn, later on a Borka, songs without words, piano, and try to borrow from my conscious self any language, tone. These songs are not about anything. At 9, Mendelssohn set Psalm 19 to music. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament show us his handiwork. Later, he decided words were too limiting. Poems could be built solely with tone. In the Hebrides, he created a landscape without words or paint, calling it first the lonely hour. Open fifth chords flow like the ancient lava that formed hexagonal pillars of black basalt and single caves. He enters it with no skill, just violas, cellos, and bassoon, and a key of B minor. I encountered Scotland first through Mendelssohn and reflect on the memory of the Castle Campbell ruin, lonely in a field of heather, as I work out voicing and fingering of his arpeggiated chords. At the piano, my mother would allow no spoken words in the room. I take it further and exclude the silent ones as well. The next one is called Elijah, who once played a violin for Stray Cat. And you may remember the story of Elijah McClain, the young black man who was killed by police in Colorado for absolutely no reason. And this is taken from the newspaper accounts of the person that he was and what he did. He was a massage therapist and taught himself for violin. He lived within a body, often cold, that struggled to breathe. He built his own boundaries, taught himself what he needed to know. His hands were a gift, the skin and tissue, in need of pressure without pain. He played the violin to calm stray cats, taken from streets and placed in cages. He told the police, "I was just going home. I'm an introvert. I have no gun. I don't do any fighting. All I was trying to do was become better. I'm so sorry. I'm just different. I just can't breathe correctly." They pressed his carotid artery, helped blood flow to his brain, injected him with drugs. After that, he said nothing. His violin is still, cold is taken over. And the next one is Chopin's poem, another of my favorite composers, called The Held Note. You, storyteller of the long note, count of the harmonic hours, flutterer of the sustained tempo, singer of two voices in the right hand, liberator of thumbs, play black keys, and fifth finger to find half timber. Here, a piano player in veiled clarity, small hands with supple wrists, hands set in marble. A composer for the short life. Let me play your nocturne from my own dark. Let someone discover an unknown melody that was in your mind as you lay dying. Let me find a second voice each time I read you. Let your held note be a candle on my way to sleep. On my way to sleep. Let us be lovers in a dream. This one is about my grandmother, called Piano with a Mandolin Pedal. She had this piano, unlike anything I've ever seen, that had two extra pedals, one that mimicked the tone of the mandolin and the other the tone of the banjo. Piano with a mandolin pedal. You cared for the car-sick girl who could not ride on family trips. You played cards, checkers, parcheesi, as if your time were free to spend. You sewed costumes for Halloween, made cookies with honey. You brushed tangled hair gently while telling the stories of an Ohio farm where frightful events ended well. You played Stephen Foster's song about a non-existent time on your old upright piano with its extra mandolin and banjo pedal until I no longer asked for more and sleep had descended. I felt safe with you until one day you confessed a crime but could not say why. And the Sunday you put a kitchen knife to your throat and were taken to the city for electroshock therapy. Not allowed to visit, I waved wanly from the sidewalk to you behind the barred window. This one is called Day of My Birth. The common exercise in writing workshops is to write about things that happened the year you were born. And for me, that was 1944, so a lot happened. Or the day you were born. This is about the day of my birth. Vesuvius erupted on that day. So a fairly minor eruption. It did a lot of damage, but it was not like the one that destroyed Pompeii. Day of my birth. Vesuvius did not explode with the violence of year 79. Did not bury cities, mold bodies in death, or trap spirits in surviving walls. It did destroy a few villages scarred by bombs and fascism. 26 war-weary Italian vineyards, all the 340th Squadron planes. Hot ash settled to burn, melt, blaze, crack their bodies, controlled, and gun torch. The 340th had bombed the links of war, bridges, tunnels, railroad junctions. In the end, Vulcan took more planes than enemy strikes. an Atlantic Ocean away in a county where snow coats the vernal equinox. I had trouble navigating the birth canal, reluctant to perhaps to enter the uncertainty, a world populated by Nazis, bombs, volcanoes that even after centuries do not sleep. And I'd like to close with one that is not in any book, it's new, called Water Over Stone, kind of a prose poem in 3 sections. The idea was to take an object and describe its significance in different stages of life. Water over stone. The Navajo guide offers me a stone from Canyon de Chelly. I hesitate, consider its weight in my luggage, consider how much my ancestors took from his ancestors, consider the weight of his own story, forced to leave home for a boarding school where children were struck for speaking their native language. Then I accept this gift, lightly in the way it is offered. 2. In the creek of my childhood, water over stones was my favorite season. Not March snow-fed water that could overflow banks, nor the August rivulets that ran between hot, dry stones. It was the shallow waters in early summer that urged me to come close, the stones shining wet, small fish darting above, sometimes my own reflected shadow. I thought I held the future in my hands as a cup of water. I didn't, but water over stones is the music that runs through me still. 3. I bend to pick up a stone at the edge of a lake, summer setting of a younger self in love. Its reddish curve fits my palm, smooth against skin. I stroke it like a memory not to be let go, like a vision of myself in an earlier life, like a dream that does not end upon waking. These waters can be rough, with waves like ocean surf, cause boats to capsize, people to drown. I could keep the stone to hold in times of dark or loss. Instead, I give it back to the lake. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. I think in some ways the sign of a good poem, even more than applause, is hearing a bunch of people go, ah. I think that's the true mark, especially the poem that has a final turn. The other thing I'm always reminded of with your book, since you deal with music so much, that's great of you to do music and language. I'm reminded of Donahue, the Irish poet, saying something like, music is what language would be if it could. So it's great of you to take that on. As promised, I want to talk a little bit about annual events before that the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center sponsors before we get to our second procedure. Since we've passed, sadly, the midpoint of the season, a couple of these events are in the past tense, the rearview mirror, but we can also look forward to the next year. The writing contest deadline was this past Saturday, and on August 10th at 2:30 in the Hall of Philosophy, we'll present the awards. That will also be on Zoom, and if you go to our webpage, which I'll mention several times, you can find a link to watch it on Zoom. That's chq.org/FCWC. Even further in the past, on July 13th and annually in mid-July, we sponsor the Authors Among Us book fair. That's a chance to meet some Chautauquan authors, such as Deb Pines, or if she's ever around in mid-July, Carol Jennings, who are selling and signing their books. That was well attended. If you've had a published book or will have by mid-July next year, you can apply once again at that webpage, chq.org/FCWC. Here's one whose deadline is fast approaching. Robert Pinsky, nearly 20 years ago, when he was poet laureate, I think he's one of the few to serve 2 consecutive terms. He established the Favorite Poem Project, at which people are invited to read their favorite poem. That's pretty self-evident, but also briefly explain why that poem means so much to them. This Saturday is the deadline for applying, once again on that same web page. And then Monday at 5 o'clock in the Hall of Blocks at 8, selected Chautauquans will read their favorite poem. Those are the main annual events I want to mention. Just a reminder of books for sale after the reading, and also Q&A after the second reading by Deb Pines, who's an award-winning New York Post headline writer and former reporter. She's the author of 11 Mimi Goldman mysteries set in, of all places, Chautauqua, and available at the Chautauqua bookstore, the library, and anywhere you read online. A grandma of 4, Chautauquan by marriage, lover of poems, coffee, classic rock, and show tunes. She now lives in New York City with her husband, Dave. Today, she will read from a new short story called The Dead Zone. It features Deb's recurring Miss Marvelette amateur, who's a Chautauquan daily reporter, grandmother, and former New York Post copy editor. Named Mimi Goldman, Deb Pines.
Thank you, Fred and Writers Center, for having me back. And thanks to all of you for showing up when you have so many choices on a beautiful Chautauqua Tuesday. My short story is very short. It's 14 pages, and I'm giving it away afterwards for free. So I thought I would spend my first 8 minutes just talking a little bit, answering a question a lot of authors are asked. And the question is, where do you get your ideas? And I'm timing myself so I don't go more than the 8 minutes, because I will read from the short story. So where I get my ideas, the question would vary depending on what kind of work you're writing. I'm aiming to write a traditional whodunit, Agatha Christie-like murder mystery. So for each of these murder mysteries, I need a sleuth, I need a murder victim or victims, I need suspects, clues, red herrings, plot twists, hopefully suspense, and a hopefully pleasing ending. So my sleuth, as Fred told you, often sparks a question from readers, and my favorite was put this way. Someone asked me, is me, you? And I have to say in some ways yes, and in some ways no. Yes, she did work at the New York Post, where I still work part-time on a copy desk. And yes, she did come from New York, where I was born. Therefore, for mystery purposes, she comes with a darker, grittier, more suspicious outlook than your basic Chautauquan. And so that part of my life is more useful to the story. As a beginning mystery writer, I actually made the character, the sleuth, almost identically me, with my same backstory, and I found I'm just not that interesting enough to sustain a whole character series. And so it is me. I gave her a better backstory. So she is the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and therefore she has an even more relentless drive for justice and more interesting stuff in her story. And where did I get that? My best friend growing up was the daughter of Holocaust survivors, so some of that paranoid, overprotective parenting comes from there, and some of it I just made up. So the sleuth is partly me, partly not me. In terms of the murder, how do I come up with the murders? I'm always looking for the murder to be an ambiguous death. I always want the story to start with Chautauquan saying, oh, the guy just dropped dead at the old first night run. Nothing suspicious. Or, oh, they're found in the lake, or, oh, they're found at the bottom of their steep, slippery Chautauqua stairs, especially when it's a woman who's vain about using her walker and has Parkinson's disease, last year's mystery. So some of how I pick the murder is I'm looking for it to be ambiguous, and I call upon my imagination, but also I research from real life cases. The staircase crime was partly inspired by a true murder or mysterious death in Durham, North Carolina, where the husband ultimately was charged, but to this day claims he's innocent. The hype for the docu-series about that case called The Staircase was crime or accident. And that's the same theme that I want in almost all my books. So sleuth, murder, I want an ambiguous murder, and I sometimes research the details from real stories. Suspects, I want them to be Chautauqua types. So I have too many musicians, too many ministers, too many retired teachers, too many cranky old landladies. I do have recurring types, but Agatha Christie has recurring types. She has your pompous, blowhard, retired military man. She has beautiful, foolish, or greedy actresses. So yes, some of my suspects and characters are recurring Chautauqua types. And when I have to be careful is when they're a very specific Chautauquan, like the editor of the Chautauqua Daily, or the chime master, or the man who takes good care of the Purple Martin houses. And sometimes, well, often I approach these people to see if they're open to talking about their life with me. Most of the time they're good-natured about it. I have run into some people less good-natured. And then I try to make sure that the fictional character is different in age, maybe, or gender, or looks from the real person, and say that these characters, yes, they're doing a job that someone does in real life, but don't confuse them with that person. Okay, so that's suspects. Some of them I get by interviewing local people. Some of them I just make up. In terms of the plot, the clues, the red herrings, the twist in the end, a lot of that's on me, but I'll just close with my very favorite clue that I ever got, and that I got from someone recommending it to me. Some people call me, why don't you write a mystery about this or that? And one of the best resources here is the woman in Lost and Found. First of all, she's a big personality herself. She has a great sense of humor, and she's like, I've got a fabulous clue for you. And it turns out it's my favorite clue ever in any of the books, and that is a lost bell tower charm. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Oh, yeah. It's a miniature bell tower that you wear around your neck. Many Chautauquans wear them. And she told me, and I didn't realize this, that many people have the clock, hands of the clock on a certain time that's meaningful to them. So in this story, someone loses a bell tower charm in an incriminating location, and the hands of the miniature clock are set to 7:04, the time 7:04, and the purchaser of this fictional bell tower, that date is meaningful for them, and therefore finding it in a particular location turns out to be potentially either damning or misdirection. And I thank the lady from Lost and Found for that clue. In terms of twists and red herrings, again, I sometimes research real cases just to make the fact pattern more persuasive. I sometimes am inspired by other books. I love Agatha Christie, so if she has a story where someone seems to have a foolproof alibi, I think, could I come up with a story with someone who's got a foolproof alibi or seemingly foolproof alibi who in the end turns out to be the killer? So I'm inspired by my own life. I'm inspired by imagination. I'm inspired by Agatha Christie all the time. And I want to turn off the timer because we're now moving on to the question of moving to reading from my current short story. And before I start the short story, I'll say that too was inspired a bit by something that happened to me. Maybe it's something very common, but have many of you or any of you felt creepy or uneasy in the back of an Uber or a car service that you've hired? Anyone? I certainly have. And this is a little bit inspired by rides to Buffalo Airport that I lined up by way of the Grapevine, the Chautauqua message board, and I lined it up. The guy picked me up early in the morning, and I got in. I just started to feel a little creepy about it, go to drive off, and he says, "Where did you hear of me?" And I said, "The Grapevine." And he said, "What's the Grapevine?" So anyway, I don't have that story here in Mimi's case, but this is a Mimi Goldman story. She's hired a ride to Buffalo Airport from the Grapevine, and she gets in initially planning to just sit in the back seat and watch videos of her grandson, a favorite pastime of hers and mine. And also she's reviewing a recent case that she's working on about 2 women missing from the Chautauqua institution. So here goes, the dead zone. And this is also a little creepier and noirish, more noirish than my usual series. But Mimi, standing in the half dark, heard an engine rev and she's startled. She had stepped out of her Chautauqua cottage at 6:20 a.m. for her 6:30 ride. Headlights blinked on a green car parked by the bell tower. It inched up Miller, past her neighbors' quiet, gingerbready cottages with wraparound porches, wicker furniture, American flags, bikes, beach toys, and barbecues. It stopped beside her. Mrs. Goldman? The driver, a skinny guy who looked to be in his 30s, wore a billed cap and dark sunglasses despite the gloom and fog hanging over the lake. Need the trunk? He eyed Mimi's black nylon carry-on. No thanks. The bag, a gift from her husband Walt, was a huge upgrade from the ratty backpack Mimi carried into her 60s. She loved its size, cool compartments, newfangled tags, and choice of straps or handles. Grabbing the strap, Mimi tossed the bag into the back seat and slid in beside it. You're Dan, right? The driver nodded, eyeing Mimi in his rearview mirror. Buffalo Airport? Yes, I'm off to visit my son in New York City. My grandson just turned 6, so we're going to celebrate. He turned silent, capably driving up the narrow, leafy, cottage-lined streets of Miller to Whitfield to Vincent toward the main gate. Mimi took the hint. Dan wasn't into chit-chat, or, she noted, cars that smelled like cars. A cloyingly fruity scent from a rearview mirror air freshener made his vehicle smell like some Brooklyn Rasta cabinet. They pulled up to the gate after passing just one other vehicle, a garbage truck, starting its rounds. Mimi slid her gate pass through a slot in the glass, dividing the front and back seats. Dan handed it to the guard, who zapped it and handed it back. Dan lifted his glasses to stare at her pass. Mimi, sliding over to the passenger side, checked him out too. Mostly unremarkable, Dan wore jeans, a black t-shirt, and leather bracelet. He had gray-blue eyes, pale white skin, a prominent Adam's apple, and the kind of scruffy blonde beard that nowadays could signal a Hollywood star or a bum. You're the one they call Miss Marvel, right? He asked with a smirk. 'Cause you're what? Marple. It's Miss Marple. Mimi, sliding back behind Dan and buckling up, left it at that, explaining her crime-solving nickname often felt pretentious. Fans considered her brainy and stubborn, but a lot of people are those things. Mimi's special gift, she thought, was her pessimism. Miss Marple has a tendency to think the worst of people, and 9 times out of 10, in the end, be proven right. And okay, a relentless drive for justice, too corny to talk about. Dan returned Mimi's card. I'm a driver taking this woman to Buffalo, he told the guard. I came in the The gate flipped up. The guard waved Dan through. He floored it, making a right onto 394. Want the AC? He asked. Don't need it, thanks. Still, the car windows went up with a zoop. The doors clicked shut. Quickly, they drove past signs of Chautauqua sprawl. Storage facilities, an opera building, parking lots, and more parking lots. The lots, empty most of the year, were jammed now during Chautauqua's 9-week summer season of high-minded lectures, concerts, church services, and other activities. They continued past Andriacchio's, the cemetery, and Half Acres Farm Stand, a favorite of Walt. Dan, eyeing her in the rear view again, tapped his thumb on the steering wheel. Mimi wasn't crazy about this guy. She pulled out her AirPods and phone to enjoy a favorite diversion, watching videos of her grandson. I'll skip past that and say, Charlie, outside, the sky in Mayville was lightning. Fog burned off the lake. Beyond Webb's Motel, Restaurant, and Fudge Shop, they slowed to a stop. A car with a boat trailer was crossing their lane, heading for the marina. Dan sighed heavily. Mimi, yearning for some fresh air, tried to open her window. It was locked. Impulsively, she tried yanking her door open. It wouldn't budge. Dan, the boat trailer passed and he floored it. Dan. Yeah? What's up with my window and door? Your window and door? They won't open. Kid-proof locks. The door just opens from the outside. I'd like to leave it in that. Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Tanner. Okay. We now have time for Q&A. So if the authors would come here where the camera can see you, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand here or out there, and we'll repeat the question. Any questions?
So is AI ever going to play a role in your writing?
Let me just repeat it in case the microphone didn't pick it up, but the question is, will AI ever play a role in your writing? And I'd like to hear an answer from both of you.
You mean, will it help me write the stories, or even be a feature? Because in one of the stories, somebody did put doctored photos using, computer trickery that I had read about, and so Mimi's son, who's a computer whiz, helped her realize that, follow the clues to realize that that was not a real photo, it was a doctored photo. So it has played a role in that way. I mean, the only other way I would mention is I have like experts I call, the retired sheriff from Chautauqua County sometimes helps me make things seem more real. And I had the best forensic expert for me because he was game for any questions or whatever. And now I have a more impatient fellow who's busier and is a forensic professor. And so there's a long answer to just that he gave me some help to make autopsy report, and it wasn't thorough enough. So I used AI to sort of flesh it out. And he's so busy, I just feel like I had called him multiple times, and I'll just have AI add a couple more details that sound official, even if they're not exactly right.
I can't imagine AI helping with poetry. I know every place you submit to journals, publishers always say no AI generated poems. I mean, I do research on lives of people like composers and events, but I always go to trusted sources. Just AI, also.
I'll share an anecdote. I'm in a writing group, and at one of our sessions, I'm looking at a fellow member of the writing group. One of the people read a poem and wasn't quite like poems he had written before, and it wasn't a bad poem, but rhymed, he didn't use the rhyme and stuff like that. And after we gave him feedback, suggestions, this was good, this would be better, stuff like that, he said, I have to confess, I couldn't come up with anything, and I told AI, write a poem in the style of X, okay? I have to confess, I was a little perturbed, that we had gone through this. And it was both nice that we knew it wasn't quite this person's poetry, but disconcerting in that it wasn't awful. I was hoping that it would be awful poetry, but it wasn't awful. Another question, either generated by you or AI. Okay. Any questions at all? Back and front, yeah.
Okay, this is, a specific question about a book that, one of your books says that I'm reading now, and you killed off a very important person. You killed off Doc at the Gazette, the software paper.
Yeah.
And
You can't forgive me.
Yeah, this question, if I can generalize, is about killing off important characters. Why do you do such a thing?
Well, I want everybody to be worried throughout all the books that everybody's fair game. I mean, my friend read this short story and I said, were you scared? And she said, well, I knew you weren't going to kill Dee. There's a spoiler alert. But, so if everybody is on the table, as a potential victim, I think. But yes, that was a sad one.
and you did make me worry about me.
Yes, and in fact, when it comes to an end, maybe she has to come to an end. I don't know, but that's where I am. Yeah.
There was another question in front of that person.
Carol, I was interested in what sparked your interest in writing poetry.
I didn't get that. What sparked your interest in writing poetry? Oh, and originally, gosh, it was more than 50 years ago.
You were in kindergarten.
So I was 25. And I don't know, I'd been through a really bad year, losing a job, an automobile accident, marriage falling apart. And I looked through the NYU continuing education catalog and saw a poetry workshop when a person I had never heard of, William Packard, who turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful teacher, mentor, editor. And I thought, well, I can do this. So I signed up.
Any other question? I have a half-formulated question because in some ways we have two very different writers, but I'm trying to think whether, Carol, you feel there's anything mysterious or mystery-like about writing poetry, or Deb, is there anything poetic about writing mystery novels? And you can go say, no, that is fine.
Even though mine seems formulaic, and I am aiming for a pattern of this, that, and the other, sometimes the writing comes more magically and feels like it's coming from a creative place. And I think, that maybe that's like the feeling poets have. Sometimes it is more, journalistic, and I'm describing things or I'm putting building blocks to try and build the suspense. But I do think the feelings when you wonder, where did that come from? The inspiration, that maybe that's a similar moment.
Well, sometimes I like to leave things a little ambiguous and not totally obvious and clear. And some lines that could be interpreted in different ways, or an ending that may seem improbable. And yeah, I think mystery should play a role. You don't want everything too straightforward.
Yeah, too straightforward would be a lecture. And I'll get to in a moment, just wanted to harken back to what I said about the and the I think it's a little bit like, oh, that person did it. It's not this person. And the final line goes this way, not that way. Your question, please.
I was just wondering, for you, going to a short story form, was that complicated? Was it hard for you?
You know, I think it's fun to do, and I had a little less time this year, you know, in my personal life, but I think it's a whole other craft, and that I would like to get better at it. You know, you do it and you read other mystery short stories and go, wow, you know, what they pack into a short amount of space. So I've been on a binge of reading like Ellery Queen magazine and Agatha Christie's short stories. Now, perhaps I should have read first, but I mean, I'm really enjoying making a study of it.
Do you ever think about putting a collection together?
Uh,
A similar theme or a string?
It is fun to do, but you know, maybe I just think I should get back to a novel again. But the mystery was very fun to do. Yeah.
And that reminds me of some scholars say the beginning of modern mystery was a short story with Edgar Allan Poe and Murders of the Rue Morgue. So, you know, returning to the roots in some ways.
Yeah.
Time for one final question, if there is one. Yeah. How scheduled are you when you're writing?
Not at all. I'm not disciplined at all. I have to feel like it. Be motivated. And sometimes the piano does that. And I play the piano and then I can go right.
When I'm aiming to have a mystery for the Chautauqua season, that gives me a deadline. So I have to have it by X date in order to have it printed by, you know, and delivered by this date. And I have to have the editor read it by this date and then leave time for corrections. So I would say I'm busiest when I'm facing a deadline. I should be starting it sooner, but the deadline really focuses me, you know, maybe my newspaper background, but so there's multiple milestones along the way that include, you know, giving it to friends and family, giving it to the paid editor, having it printed, and each of those, if I back it up, gives me a date that I have to have it done by, and I'm busiest right before that date.
Any other questions? One just occurred to me. See if I'm making a wrong assumption or not. With a mystery, I assume you know who did it pretty much from the beginning. So you know your ending.
Yeah.
Do you know how your tones of them?
No, not necessarily. I mean, sometimes the ending comes first and then you go back and write the poem that fits the ending. But often you don't know until it happens.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give both of them a hand. Please bear with me. I would like to make just a couple closing announcements about literary and theatrical events. First of all, today at 4 o'clock, I emphasize 4 because in the weekly calendar it says it's at 3, but at 4 o'clock, a combination of the Friends of the Chautauqua Theater Company and the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center will present a tribute to Jules Pfeiffer. I hope lots of you remember him. He died in January of this year. He was a cartoonist, a screenwriter, a novelist, and a Chautauqua speaker back in 2014. In his honor, Stephen Stout of the Friends of the Chautauqua Theater will be directing 4 actors in selections from a collection of skits, lots of them based on the cartoons called Pfeiffer's People. The whole thing, including an introduction by something of a Pfeiffer scholar, or at least a fan, Phil Lerman, will take no more than an hour, so it won't infringe on dinner. Please, up in the alumni hall ballroom, 4 o'clock, not 3 o'clock. Actors don't get there till 3:30. Okay. Just a few other reminders. Tomorrow at 12:15, right here on this course, the Young Readers program will be discussing Squire by Nadia Shamus and Sarah Alfica. It's a book for ages 12 and up. On Thursday in the Hall of Philosophy at 3:30, Nana Kwame Hadza-Brena will be discussing his novel, Jane Gang All-Stars. On Friday on the porch at 12:15, we have a community series called Summer on the Steps. This week, members of the literary arts staff will be reading their work, in addition to a couple of spotlight readers from the workshops that were taught this week. And the conclusion of that is usually the reading of the community poem. The community poem is written by the community. So if you would like to contribute to this week's community poem, either stop by the Poetry Makerspace near Holquist. If you're an old timer, you'll know it as the former CLSC veranda. Or go to poetry.phq.org. If you keep scrolling and keep saying that you want to write and you want to share your voice, it'll take you to this week's prompt. Our sister art, the Chautauqua Theater Company, is busy this week. On Thursday, the directing fellows will present 3 one-act plays at 2 o'clock and 7:30, and on Friday, the new play workshop number 2 takes place. If you've never attended, it's an exciting opportunity to see a play in an early state and have actual input. Self-serving anecdote. One play called Birthday Candles went from here to Detroit to Broadway. Noah Hadel, the author, in an online discussion said, "Oh yeah, I was at Chautauqua, and I said that the main character was in 16 performances of this high school play, and some dude came up to me and said, high schools only do 8 at most." The dude abides. Okay. Please join us next week for the Office Hour as novelist Pat Auerbach will read from her most recent work, Dreams of Drowning, and might even give us a preview of something in the future. Please consider joining the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center to help sponsor all these different events. There will be a video uploaded to YouTube of this reading if you want to relive it, or if you want to recommend it to somebody else. My abject apologies to Carol and Zoom people. Sound was not working for the first poem. Okay, after that it's on. Maybe we can ask AI to dub it in or something, but my apologies. Operator error. Anyway, thank you for joining us for this. I hope to see you at other literary events. Take care.